The air smelled of war, not dust or smoke, but something cold and metallic and sour, like betrayal. Commander Jareth crouched beside the ridge, his rifle silent, eyes fixed on the approaching alien ship. He wasn't here to fight, not yet. He was here to find her. The runaway alien girl who had killed 3 guards, stolen a Federation vessel, and vanished behind enemy lines. Her name was Sirael, and according to the reports, she was dangerous. The higher-ups wanted her back alive. Not because they cared, but because she knew something worth dying for. Jareth didn't ask questions. He just followed orders. Until he saw her, she stepped from the wreckage like a ghost from fire. Her armor was scorched, cracked in places but still radiant. Sleek and sharp, it clung to her like a second skin. Her fiery red hair spilled over her shoulder as she turned. Holding a plasma dagger in one hand, Jareth didn't fire. He should have, but her eyes met his before he could breathe. They were glowing not with hate, not with fear, but something sadder. As if she already knew he was coming and had accepted it. "You tracked me fast," she said, her voice soft, the blade lowering by an inch. "You made it easy," Jareth replied. He stood, carefully, slowly. Leaving a trail of wreckage isn't the best way to stay hidden. Sirael didn't smile, but her lips twitched slightly. "I wanted to be found. Just not by them." She turned away and walked back into the cave behind the crash site. For a second, Jareth stood frozen. Then his boots moved on their own, following her into the darkness. Inside, the cave was warm, lit by a single crystal light jammed into the rocks. She sat by the wall, her shoulders heavy, her breathing slow. Her armor hissed as it cooled. "They're going to kill me," she said. "Or worse, take me back." Jareth leaned against the opposite wall, not raising his weapon. "Then you shouldn't have run." "I had to. They were using us. We weren't soldiers to them. We were tools. Weapons to throw at your kind." Jareth didn't respond. He had seen too many bodies, too many broken faces to doubt that truth. "I didn't ask to feel this way," she whispered. "About your people. About you." He stared at her, unsure whether she meant him or humans in general. He chose silence. She touched the seam of her armor, fingers brushing over the curved metal across her chest. "This armor, they built it to control us, lock it down, keep us strong and obedient. But sometimes it feels like a prison." She looked at him again, eyes glimmering. "If I take it off, maybe they can't find me. Maybe I can finally feel something real." Jareth didn't know what to say. 100 orders screamed in his head. Bring her in. Cuff her. Report immediately. But none of them felt right. Instead, he said, "It's your choice. I'm not here to force you." She let out a shaky breath, unfastening one gauntlet. The clink of metal echoed in the cave. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like shedding the past one piece at a time. "I don't want to be their weapon," she said. "And I don't want to be yours either. I just want to stop running." Outside, thunder rolled. Not from a storm but engines. Federation and enemy both. They were closing in. The war wouldn't wait. Jareth stood. "We need to move. If they find us here, you won't get a second chance." She hesitated, then stood too. Her armor was halfway removed now. She looked smaller, softer, more real. Not a weapon. Just a woman lost between two worlds. "I'll go with you," she said quietly. "But if my armor stops us, I'll take it off." Jareth nodded. "Then let's make sure no one ever makes you wear it again." They vanished into the shadows of the cave, together. The cave tunnel twisted deeper into the earth. Damp and silent, except for the soft echoes of their footsteps. Jareth moved ahead cautiously, scanning the stone walls as the light from his wrist beacon flickered against moisture and moss. Behind him, Sirael followed with her armor half removed, carrying only what was necessary. Each step slower than the last. Her breathing had changed. She wasn't used to the cold anymore. Her people came from a world of heat, and now her exposed arms trembled under the drop in temperature. "I can handle this," she said without being asked. "I didn't say anything," Jareth replied, but he slowed his pace anyway. They came upon a narrow crevice, just wide enough to squeeze through. Jareth went first, pushing his way sideways, his gear scraping the stone. Serail followed without complaint, though the cave snagged at the metal plate still clinging to her thighs. She winced and pulled herself free. Once through, the space opened into a natural chamber, wide and dark. Jareth raised his arm and illuminated the cavern in bright blue-white light. There was a small underground stream flowing near one side. Sound of trickling water filled the silence between them. Serail dropped to one knee and cupped water in her hand, drinking slowly. She stayed still for a long time, just listening. "They'll use heat scanners," Jareth said. "We'll need to keep moving soon." She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "Do you believe in what you're fighting for?" The question surprised him. He sat down across from her, boots resting on cold stone. "I believe in surviving. Everything else changes too much." Serail nodded, but her eyes were distant. "They said you humans were beasts, unthinking, cold, but you've done more for me than any of my commanders," Jareth shrugged. "Maybe that's because I'm not trying to own you." She looked at him then, and something shifted in her face. Not just curiosity. Trust. He saw her glance at the remaining pieces of her armor. "You really think it's tracking you?" He asked. "It's not just metal," she replied. "It's bonded. Microscopic sensors, neural lace. I can feel when it listens to me. Then we ditch it," he said. "Every last piece." She hesitated, then reached for the buckles at her waist. She turned her back slightly, not out of shame, but habit. Jareth didn't look away, but he didn't stare either. He simply waited. As the armor fell to the ground, it made a deep, final sound, like the last chain hitting stone. She stood in a tight black suit, thin but insulating. Her movements were lighter, her shoulders looser. "Feels strange," she said. "Like breathing air after living underwater." Jareth stood and extended a hand. "Then let's not go back under." She took it. Her grip was strong. No hesitation now. Whatever fear she had buried it. They moved out of the chamber, following the sound of the stream, letting it guide them to an exit. Outside the mountain, dusk had begun to fall. The sky was orange and silver, stars blinking in early. Jareth pulled up his scanner. 3 ships landed near the eastern ridge. Federation markings. "They're getting close." Serail tilted her head. "They'll send drones first, then the retrieval team. I know their pattern. Then we use it against them," Jareth said. They slid down the hillside, crouched low. The wind picked up, rustling leaves and lifting Serail's hair like fire across the sky. They found cover under a rocky outcrop. Jareth set up a small pulse scrambler and jammed nearby signals. Serail watched him work. "You know more than most soldiers." "I wasn't always a soldier," he replied. "I was an engineer before the war." She smiled faintly. "And now you fix people instead of machines." He looked at her seriously. "Not all people want to be fixed." "I do," she whispered. They rested under the rock, silent for a few minutes. Then the whirring sound of engines began in the distance. Serail's eyes narrowed. "Those aren't Federation. That's a scythe patrol." "Your people?" he asked. "They'll kill both of us," she said. "I'm a traitor, and you're human." Jareth stood. "Then we move now." "Come on." They dashed through the valley floor, ducking behind fallen logs and rock pillars. The sound of drones buzzed high above. The terrain grew steeper. Jareth helped her up a ledge, pulling her hand as she climbed. She slipped once, but he caught her with both arms. She looked into his eyes as he held her. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you asked," he said simply. "At the top of the ridge, They found an old watchtower, half collapsed but still standing. Jareth checked the entry. It was clear. They climbed inside and took shelter. From here, they could see the valley. Drones searched the riverbank now. The soldiers would follow soon. Cyril leaned against the wall, breathing harder than before. If they find us here, we won't make it. Then we make them look somewhere else, Jareth replied. How? She asked. He reached into his pack and pulled out a flare beacon. I rigged this with a delay. We launch it east. They'll follow the signal. It buys us hours. She watched him carefully. You keep risking yourself. For me, you keep choosing. To trust me, he answered. She stepped closer, her voice lower now. And if my armor was the only thing that kept me distant, then I don't want it anymore. The flare fired. The light rose into the night sky, brighter than anything around. Them. And for the first time since the crash, Cyril didn't feel hunted. She felt free. The night deepened, bringing with it a strange stillness that wrapped around the broken tower like a warning. Jareth adjusted the beacon timer again, setting it for a second pulse to confuse the enemy scouts. He knew they wouldn't fall for one decoy, but maybe two would delay them long enough. Cyril crouched beside the stone window, watching the ridge below. Her eyes were sharper in low light than his, trained by years of survival and war. They're spreading too fast, she said. The drones are scanning the heat patterns. They're not chasing the flare anymore, Jareth joined her. He saw the glowing orbs sweep over the landscape like predators hunting in the dark. We need to move again. They're narrowing the circle. Cyril nodded, then looked down at the last piece of her gear, a communication core wrapped in cracked alloy. This might be the last thing tracking me. Can you destroy it? Jareth asked. I can do more than that, she sighed. I can use it against them. She opened the small core with careful fingers and rewired its signal emitter. Sparks flickered, and the center glowed with a soft pulse. She adjusted the frequency and aimed it toward the northwest slope. They'll think I've gone that way. The signal is authentic. It'll hold for 20 minutes. That gives us enough time to cross the basin, Jareth said. They gathered their packs. Cyril strapped a simple harness over her bodysuit, now fully free from her armor. Without it, she moved faster, lighter, but not weaker. In fact, Jareth noticed how much stronger she looked when unbound. They left the tower quietly, moving downhill, through wild grass and undergrowth. The slope was steep, but the trees gave them cover. Jareth kept an eye on the scanner in his hand. The red dots were shifting, but slowly. They're still tracking the original heat signature. Good, Cyril whispered. Let them waste their time. As they reached the basin floor, the terrain shifted. Mist clung to the ground, rising. From hidden hot springs that bubbled beneath the rocks. We're close to the old thermal vents, Jareth said. These used to power scout stations. I know this place, Cyril replied. There's a service tunnel near the north wall. Leads straight into the cliffs. Will it get us out? He asked. If it hasn't collapsed, she said. They followed the steam, each step careful. The ground was soft in places. Cyril almost slipped, but Jareth caught her wrist and steadied her. I'm not used to being saved, she said, her voice low. You've saved yourself more than enough. He answered. They found the tunnel just where she remembered it. Half covered by moss and rubble, it was barely visible. Jareth cleared the entrance with his boot and ducked inside. Cyril followed. The tunnel smelled of minerals and old air. It was narrow but stable. Lights embedded in the ceiling flickered weakly, running on forgotten power reserves. They walked in silence for several minutes, letting the dark tunnel surround them. Then Cyril broke the quiet. I was supposed to be a commander, she said. Born into a warrior caste. My fate sealed before I could even speak. Jareth looked over. And you ran away from all that. Why now? Because I saw something different, she said. I saw a human soldier help his wounded enemy. I saw kindness where I was taught to see only weakness. Jareth didn't speak, but the words settled deep inside him. They reached a junction where the tunnel split. Cyril checked the markings etched into the wall. Left goes to the lower vents. Right leads to an old cargo platform. We take right. They turned and moved quickly. The tunnel opened into a loading bay, abandoned and rusted. Old crates, long forgotten, were stacked in corners. Dust hung in the air like quiet ghosts. Jareth approached a console and tried the panel. It flickered and died. Power's almost gone. I only need it for 1 second, Cyril said. She placed her hand on the console and pressed a hidden switch. A pulse traveled through the system. Somewhere deep metal groaned. A door behind them opened slowly, revealing a small transport chamber with faded markings. This can take us under the cliffs, Cyril said. It's risky, but it's the fastest way. They stepped inside. Jareth closed the door and locked the panel behind them. The floor vibrated as the chamber came to life, sliding slowly into the depths. As the chamber moved, Cyril leaned back against the wall, her arms folded. You don't ask many questions, she said. I listen better than I talk. Jareth replied. I like that, she said quietly. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with shared understanding, with weight neither of them spoke aloud. When the chamber stopped, the door opened into a dim cavern with multiple exits. A breeze touched their faces, fresh air. They were near the surface again. Jareth stepped out first, scanning the paths. We head east. There's an old village marked on the map. If it's still there, we can find shelter, Cyril joined. Him. Then we rest, and then we plan. Because I'm not going to keep running without fighting back. Jareth looked at her, not just as a mission, but as a person who had chosen to trust him, to shed her armor and walk beside him. Then, let's give them a reason to regret chasing us. Together, they disappeared into the winding trail of stone and wind. Asterisk. The wind whistled softly through the narrow mountain pass as the first light of dawn painted the sky in faded gold. Jareth and Cyril moved carefully along the jagged trail, keeping low, their eyes scanning every distant shadow. Below them, the ruins of the old village lay still. Crumbling walls, collapsed roofs, and rusted machines scattered among weeds and cracked stone. This place looks dead, Jareth muttered. Dead places are often the safest, Cyril replied. They descended quietly, taking cover behind broken structures. Birds scattered as they approached, wings flapping against the silent air. Jareth entered what had once been a storage barn. Inside, the walls still stood firm. He motioned Cyril in and checked the exits. It's dry. Good shelter, he said. Cyril nodded and dropped her pack. She walked to the window and stared out at the empty buildings. This world used to be ours, she said. Before the Federation arrived, Jareth didn't ask what happened. He already knew. Colonies fell. Cultures changed. War erased history faster than time ever could. Cyril sat down on the floor, stretching her legs. Her body showed signs of exhaustion, but her eyes remained sharp. You're used to running, Jareth said. I was never trained to rest, she answered. He gave a tired smile. You're allowed to stop. Just for now, the silence grew heavier. Jareth sat beside her and checked his gear. A low beep from his communicator made him freeze. He tapped the screen. A hidden ping. Someone had accessed the downed Federation probe in Sector 12. The same sector where their flare had been launched. They took the bait, Jareth said. Cyril leaned over. How many signals? 3 ships. Small patrol. Class, they're searching the hills now. We still have time. Cyril leaned back and looked at the cracked ceiling. I never imagined trusting someone like this. Letting them see me without the mask. Without the uniform, Jareth looked at her closely. You're not just escaping them. You're escaping who they told you to be. She nodded slowly. I was told to kill humans without hesitation, she said. To see you as inferior, unworthy. But when I saw your medic saving enemy soldiers, something broke inside me. Jareth stared ahead. They told us the same about you. That you're cold, unfeeling. But I've never met anyone more human than you. Her lips curved slightly. I'm not human. But I think I understand what that word truly means now. They rested in the barn for a few hours. Enough time to recover, not enough to feel safe. By midday, they left the ruins and followed an old irrigation canal toward the eastern plateau. The land grew green again. Vines crept along broken pipes. Strange blue flowers bloomed in clusters, untouched by war. Surail touched one gently. My mother used to grow these. They were banned by the War Council. Said to attract predators. Beautiful things always. Seemed to be dangerous, Jareth said. She plucked one and tucked it behind her ear. Maybe that's why I like them. They kept walking until they found the edge of an old launch platform. From there, they could see the valley below, and it crashed. Drone half buried in the grass, Jareth crouched and pulled out his scope. Looks like it's Federation tech, damaged, probably hit during the last sweep. He moved toward it carefully. Surail watched from a distance, her body tense. Jareth reached the drone and pried open the panel. The inside was scorched, but one data chip still blinked softly. He took it and returned to Surail. This could tell us where they're heading next. If we know their route, we move opposite. She looked at the chip. Can we decode it without alerting them? Yes, if I use one of the old satellites. There's a relay tower north of here. Still offline, but the systems might be intact. Then we go, she said. They headed north through narrow rock trails and scattered trees. The heat returned slowly and the air thickened. By late afternoon, they reached the tower. Its metal frame leaned slightly, vines wrapped around its spine like green veins. Inside, the power grid was dead. Dust covered every console. Jareth knelt and began connecting wires manually. Surail kept watch outside. Her fingers hovered near her weapon, but her face stayed calm. Jareth powered the relay using a backup cell from his armor. The console blinked. To life. The screen flickered, showing ancient commands. He inserted the data chip and watched as lines of code filled the screen. Then, a map appeared. Red dots marked search zones. They were narrowing fast. They're heading south, past the valley. They think we're doubling back, he said. Surail entered the tower and looked at the display. Then we head west. Across the river. There's a smuggler path that leads to the border cliffs. We'll need supplies, Jareth said. Do you know a drop point? She pointed at an old symbol on the map. Here, abandoned outpost. Some rebels used to leave caches there. Then, that's where we go, Jareth said. He shut down the console and wiped the memory. No traces left behind. They exited the tower just as the sun began to fall below the peaks. As they walked, Surail looked over her shoulder. The tower stood like a skeleton behind them, a symbol of the world they were leaving behind. Jareth noticed her silence. You thinking of going back? She shook her head. No, I'm thinking of what I'll become if I keep moving forward. He didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. They continued toward the cliffs where the wind grew colder and the sky turned purple. Side by side, they walked as fugitives but not as enemies. They walked as something new, asterisk. The cliffside trail was narrow and silent, carved by time and untouched by machines for decades. Jareth led the way, checking his scanner every few steps, watching for signals or patrol sweeps. Surail walked behind him, her feet steady, her eyes sharper than ever. Her steps made no sound against the cold stone. Below them, the river glowed faintly under the moonlight, winding through the valley like a silver thread. The air here felt older. The kind of stillness that came before ancient storms or forgotten battles. Surail stopped near a worn marker carved into the rock. This is it. The rebel outpost is just beyond that ridge. Jareth nodded and crouched, looking through the scope. Toward the outpost entrance. The small bunker was half buried in earth, overgrown and silent. They moved fast but quiet, sliding down the slope and approaching the entrance from the shadows. Jareth tried the door. It didn't open, Serail placed her hand on a small panel beside the frame and pressed 2 fingers into a hidden groove. The lock hissed softly and clicked. You remember the code? Jareth asked. My sister brought me here once, she said. Before she vanished. Inside, the bunker smelled like dust and old fuel. Racks of empty crates lined the walls. Cobwebs clung to the corners like forgotten warnings. They moved carefully until they reached the back room. Jareth opened a crate and pulled out 2 ration packs, still sealed. Looks like they left in a hurry but forgot to clean out everything. Serail found a small case under a rusted panel. Inside were thermal blankets, a flare gun, and a map sealed in plastic. This will help, she said. The trail splits. Beyond the ridge, one path leads into neutral land. The other leads to a Federation checkpoint. We avoid the checkpoint, Jareth said immediately. She gave a small nod. We'll need to rest first. Just for an hour. My legs are starting to feel like stone. They sat near a corner where the wall hadn't collapsed. Jareth shared the rations, heating them with a portable coil. Serail ate slowly. We're being hunted by both sides, she said. What happens if we get caught? Jareth didn't answer right away. He finished his bite and looked at her. Directly, if they catch you, they'll erase everything that makes you who you are. And if they catch me, they'll pretend this never happened. Then we don't get caught, she whispered. After eating, they wrapped themselves in the thermal blankets. The cold in the bunker had worsened with nightfall. Serail rested her head against the wall, closing her eyes but not sleeping. When this is over, where will you go? Jareth stared at the ceiling. Maybe I'll find a place with trees. No scanners, no orders. Just air and quiet. She smiled faintly. I'd like that too. A place where no one knows my name. A sound echoed outside. A soft mechanical hum, rising and falling. Jareth sat up quickly and scanned the door. Drones, he said. Low range, 2 of them, sweeping the ridge. Serail stood immediately. They're scouting the border. If they find this place, we won't be able to outrun them. Jareth packed their gear in seconds. We leave now. Through the tunnel exit. There's a slope behind the bunker. They slipped out the back and crawled through the collapsed wall. The slope beyond was steep, but dry. They slid down on their boots, staying low. The drone's red lights passed over the top of the ridge. Scanning the rocks where they had just been, they reached the bottom and hid beneath an overhang. The drone moved on, unaware. That was close, Jareth whispered. Too close, Serail said. They're getting smarter. They're learning our paths. Then we stopped following paths, Jareth replied. They hiked through the night, staying off old trails. Serail led them through broken forest paths and across shallow streams. By the time dawn returned, their clothes were damp, their breaths short, but they were safe for the moment. They stopped near a field of flat stones warmed by the rising sun. Serail sat down heavily and pulled off her boots. My feet hate me, she said. Jareth chuckled. Join the club. He sat beside her. They watched the sun rise over the distant trees, painting the world in soft colors. This might be the last sunrise we see together, she said softly. Then it's a good one. Jareth replied. She turned her head, meeting his eyes. I've never trusted anyone this much. Not even myself. I didn't expect to trust someone like you either, he said. But you've never given me a reason to doubt. Serail reached into her pack and pulled out the last piece of her armor, a small core fragment. She held it up to the light. This is the last part of who I was, she said. But I'm not sure it's who I want to be anymore. She placed the core on the stone beside her. and smashed it with the butt of her dagger. Sparks flew, and the metal cracked open. Jareth watched silently. She turned to him again. Now there's nothing left of the old me. Just what I choose to be next. And what do you choose? He asked. Sarael looked out at the horizon, her eyes calm and fierce. Free, Jareth nodded. Then let's keep it that way. They stood again, shoulders brushing as they prepared to move forward. 2 runaways, 2 survivors. And no more chains between them. The sun had risen fully now, casting golden light across the broken earth and tall grass of the borderlands. Jareth and Sarael moved quietly through the open field, their shadows long behind them, stretched like ghosts from another life. The smugglers' trail wasn't marked, but Sarael remembered the old signals carved into stone and tree bark. Simple shapes, half hidden but clear to trained eyes. They followed those signs through low hills and dried riverbeds. Their path bent west, away from the Federation patrol zones, and toward neutral land. We're close, Sarael said. Another hour, maybe less. Then we'll be out of reach. Jareth didn't relax. He scanned the sky, the ridges, the horizon. There were no ships yet, but he trusted silence even less than he trusted noise. They stopped beneath a ridge to drink from a spring. Sarael knelt beside the water, dipping her hands slowly and splashing her face. Jareth sat on a nearby rock and removed his gloves. This all started with a mission. Now it feels like something else. Sarael looked up, water dripping from her chin. Do you regret following me? He shook his head. No, I regret waiting so long to stop following orders. She smiled, a quiet expression, but it reached her eyes. Then her face changed. She stiffened and turned toward the west. What is it? Jareth asked. She pointed to the ridge. Do you hear that? He stood quickly, raising his scope. At first, nothing. Then a faint shimmer in the sky. Then the growing hum of a stealth cruiser. They're scanning the border. That's not a patrol ship. That's a hunter class. Sarael stood beside him. If they see us now, they'll mark our location and drop a team. We can't outrun them from here. Jareth looked at the narrow path climbing up the rocks. We go high. If we reach the wind cliffs, we can mask our heat signatures. They ran together, climbing the narrow ridge with hands and boots, kicking loose stones behind them. The hum of the cruiser grew louder. Wind stirred violently around them. Below, grass bent in waves. The ship passed slowly, scanning wide with its deep blue beam. Sarael reached the top first and ducked beneath a stone shelf. Jareth followed just as the scanner swept across their trail. For several seconds, neither of them breathed. The beam passed over their old position and moved on. The cruiser hovered for another minute, then shifted direction and veered toward the eastern ridge. They didn't find us, Jareth whispered. But they're close, Sarael said. Too close. They crawled forward to another path and descended the cliff slowly. The rocks were sharp, and the drop dangerous. About halfway down, a support beam from an old station jutted from the side. Sarael used it to swing to a ledge, but it cracked under her weight. Jareth lunged and caught her wrist just in time. Her body dangled over the drop, feet searching for a hold. Let go, she said through gritted teeth. Not a chance, Jareth replied. He pulled with every bit of strength he had, straining against the angle. She climbed with him, step by step, until she reached the ledge. They collapsed beside each other, breathing hard. You're heavier than you look, he said between breaths. I'm stronger than you think, she replied. They laughed quietly, the tension slipping for a brief moment. Then they stood again and continued the descent. At the bottom of the cliff, they found a grove of black trees twisted by wind and time. In the center stood a monolith, covered in moss and ancient carvings. This marks the boundary, Sarael said. Beyond this, no side claims rule. Jareth touched the stone. It felt warm despite the shade. What happens now? She looked across the empty land ahead. Now we vanish. We leave the war, the commands, the chains. We choose our own path. They walked past the monolith into open ground. No sensors. No cameras. Just dry earth and sky, but peace did not. Last, a distant rumble shook the ground. They turned and saw a shadow rising behind the ridge. A second cruiser, larger than the first, descending rapidly. They found something, Jareth said. Maybe a trace, or maybe a guess. Either way, they're coming fast. We can't outrun that ship, Cyril said. Then we don't run, Jareth replied. He pulled out a beacon and placed it on the ground, setting the timer. You're calling them here? She asked. I'm calling their attention here. We'll move wide, through the canyon. The beacon will emit your old signal signature. They'll think you panicked and turned back. Cyril looked at him for a long second. That might get you killed, not if we move fast enough, he said. She didn't argue. She just nodded. They turned west again, feet pounding against the hard earth, their path zigzagging toward a canyon wall of red stone and deep crevices. The cruiser scanned where they had been minutes ago, then fired a recon pod to the beacons. Position, it worked. The ship hovered there, unleashing drones and scanning devices, all directed at the false signal, in the shadows of the canyon. Jareth and Cyril climbed into a crack between stone pillars and vanished into the narrow path beyond. The wind howled over the rocks, carrying the scent of metal and fuel behind them. But they kept moving forward. Each step was a choice. Each breath a promise. And neither of them looked back. The canyon narrowed into a winding stone corridor, carved by centuries of water and wind. Jareth and Cyril moved through the path with caution, guided only by the pale light that spilled from cracks above. The sound of the cruiser faded behind them, muffled by thick walls and layered stone. They didn't speak. Every step felt heavier now, not because of fear, but because the journey was almost over. Ahead, the canyon opened into a wide clearing with jagged cliffs protecting three sides. In the center stood an old outpost untouched, hidden and long. Abandoned. Cyril approached first, scanning the walls for traps. No energy readings. This place is clean. Jareth followed, stepping into the silent chamber at the base of the tower. A power terminal blinked once and died. Everything else was dead. This was used during the First War, she said, as a listening post. Only rebels knew how to reach it. They placed their packs down and collapsed beside the old table in the center. The dust didn't bother them. Silence did not threaten them anymore. Jareth unstrapped the last piece of tech from his wrist and tossed it onto the table. I won't need this anymore. Cyril leaned back against the wall, arms resting across her knees. We've made it. For now, he nodded slowly. For now is better than never. The room was cold, but quiet. No buzz of drones. No hum of scanners. Just stillness and the soft sound of breath. Cyril pulled out a small data crystal. This holds everything I've seen. Everything I know. If they ever find me, they'll destroy it. Jareth reached forward and took it from her hand. Then, we don't let them find us. He stood and placed the crystal in a small hidden compartment beneath the wall panel. Then he sealed it shut with a silent press. Cyril watched him closely. You always find the quietest way to do the right thing. You already did the hard part, he said. You chose to be free, she smiled, tired but sure. And you chose to help me when no one else would. Outside, the wind picked up again, stirring dust and rattling old wires. Jareth stood at the doorway, watching the sky turn gold once more. Cyril joined him, standing at his side, both gazing into the horizon. We'll need to move again soon, she said. Even this place won't stay hidden forever. We will. He replied. We're not the same people they were chasing. She turned to him, her voice softer than the wind. Then tell me who we are now. Jareth looked at her, his eyes steady. We're not soldiers, not fugitives, not enemies. Just two people who refuse to keep running from truth. She reached for his hand and held it. Her fingers were warm. Steady, real. I told you I'd take off my armor if it stopped us, she said. And now I don't ever want it back. He squeezed her hand gently. Then we leave it behind for good. They sat outside as night returned, stars climbing into view one by one. The fire they built was small, but bright. They shared their last meal in silence, content to simply be present. No alarms, no missions. Just warmth and space between words. Later, as the fire dimmed, Cyril leaned against his shoulder. Her voice was quiet, but firm. I don't want to be forgotten. Not by you. You won't be, he said. Not as long as I breathe. She closed her eyes, and he held her there beneath the stars, wrapped in silence and peace. By morning, they would move again. New names, new clothes. A new story to walk into. But tonight, they were exactly who they were meant to be. Together, free, alive, unchained.